It's not that. It is head-to-head. And here representing the right is Lettice Bromovsky from The Mail Online. And we've got Matthew Talbot from, well, the left.
More broadly, yeah. More broadly. We're going to be nice then.
Okay, shake hands, make some eye contact, hope you're having a nice chat outside and now get ready to fight. Okay, so here we go. Typical EU, I would say that. They've come out and produced a report saying that Brexit is the main driver of Britain's worsening migration crisis. This is according to an official research document. They've basically said that if we're still in the EU, they'd have helped take some people back.
I feel like slightly what you said there, I'm going to slightly agree. It's not exactly a neutral place that they're going to be coming from in terms of this report and in terms of what it says. We're also approaching now some post-Brexit discussions that are going to be coming up. It feels a little like they're trying to push a certain narrative ahead of that. But that being said, obviously, I don't think that we can say that the reason we've got such high immigration now is because of one policy that happened 10 years ago. If we're looking at it from a legal immigration standpoint, that's obviously being driven at the grassroots by these criminal smuggling gangs and our inability to get a hold on that. Whether you're the EU or the UK, we all seem to have an inability to get a hold of that. What they said in the report, that they insist that they could have done it better, they could have helped us out. Again, we currently have in place a £450 million deal with France in which they're meant to be helping us stop the gangs, and yet we see media reports time and time again showing the police standing by as these migrants get into boats crossing the channel, and that's not doing much. I'm not quite sure what more the EU think they could be doing.
I mean, she's got a point, doesn't she? Frankly, the EU can't manage its own external borders. It doesn't even have any internal borders, which is why so many people are able to traipse across the continent, and then, in theory, we were supposed to be taking back control, and frankly, nobody did.
Well, because it wasn't just about taking back control, it was also removing elements that helped us keep elements of control. I think whether it's the main driver is one thing, there's all sorts of drivers that cause migration, but I think there's a part to play for things like the Dublin Agreement. Obviously, when we were in the EU, the Dublin Agreement allowed us to have essentially a returns agreement whereby if someone was to come to this country illegally via small boat or any other means, you would be able to send them back to the first EU country they set foot in en route to the UK. We never replaced the Dublin Agreement.
Well, we famously never really used it either when we had it.
Well, I would say most people who were sold Brexit as a bit of a silver bullet for immigration purposes would say that our borders are more out of control than they ever have.
Without a doubt.
And that therefore,
I mean, is
lies
that the fault of Brexit, though? Is that the fault, frankly, of the people who, after Brexit, were expected to put policies in place to reduce migration, and Boris Johnson, who banged on and on and on about taking back control of the borders as part of Vote Leave, did the opposite. He increased the level of which, the threshold of the threshold of earnings you needed to achieve to be able to come over, and that was legally, of course, and also which dependents you can bring, even if you're there studying, sort of golf course maintenance or something. You can bring your nan and your uncle. And then when it comes to the small boats crisis, we could have led the way. I always think we could have been a vanguard in Britain. We could have been the country to say we're actually going to adopt an Australia-style policy.
But I think we still could. I think part of the problem is the fact that during COVID, Boris said, right, we need other people, hospitality, social care, whatever, and he's let all sorts of people in. This is now something we know quite widely. I think Keir could take leadership on this by calling an extraordinary summit. At the moment, the only way you can legally claim asylum in a country is to physically be there. Therefore, if you are a true refugee or asylum seeker from a Ukraine or an Afghanistan or any of these sort of places, you're not getting on a plane. You're not getting on a plane to come over. You're coming via irregular means. So I think because this is a Europe-wide issue, it's not just affecting us, he could call an extraordinary summit to discuss what the UN Convention on the 1951 Convention on Refugees really is anymore. Very different world from 1951. We set it up post-World War II to accept Jewish people and those that were fleeing genuine persecution. We now need to discuss what being a refugee is, because people do flee persecution, but because of ease now, I suppose, or people being desperate, we don't know who these people are. You cannot extrapolate people who are genuine refugees from people that are throwing their passports in the channel and potentially have nefarious ideas come into this country, or are just economic migrants that don't want to pay the visa fees. And therefore, I think you quell the reform sort of argument over the small boats and people coming across, because there's processing points maybe at Calais or elsewhere, or you've set up something like that, or you've also pleased the left of your party, because they're going, oh, this is a safe and legal route, we like this, people aren't dying in the Channel. And I don't know why he's not doing it and instead trying to set up either the one in, one out or the returns agreement that, for me, is just tinkering rather than dealing with the issue at hand.
I mean, talking about the issue at hand in terms of the radical shift in polling that's happened lately, there's a mega poll today in The Sun, which we've been seeing a lot of these lately, projecting quite how many seats various parties are going to win. According to their poll, Reform would get 271 seats. Labour Party would be knocked back to 178 seats. Lord knows what the Conservatives would have, like 5 or something.
50, I think.
50, 70, that's actually quite generous. I've seen more cataclysmic than that in other polling reports. But I mean, this is it. Do you think that that's going to change, Lettice? Because what is quite clear is this government, like Matthew's saying, isn't really taking the bold action needed to tackle the small boats crisis. There are plenty of levers surely available, like calling for the national emergency, saying this is a security threat to this country, which we know it is. They could have brought back the Rwanda plan. There's various things they could do. He's not really taking any decisive action over this. This is clearly one of the biggest doorstep issues. Only one man, frankly, in this day and age is synonymous with border control, which is why that polling's so high.
I mean, it's definitely part of the whole reform package, and I think what we've seen over the past few months, this sort of historic rise of reform, I think really plays into the appetite of change that we have in the UK at the moment. I mean, we've still got 4 years to the next general election, but if we think just 5 years ago, it was the Tories who were having their landslide election under Boris Johnson. A year ago, it was Labour having their landslide election, and now here we are today with Keir Starmer's own personal polling being at an all-time low. So who knows what the next 4 years can bring. But I do think that this is important. I think the other thing that it is at play is that people are just disappointed with what they've seen over this past year from Labour, from the welfare reforms that we've seen them U-turn on, from winter fuel payments that we're seeing them U-turn on again. Like, we just don't quite know what they stand for. And with Nigel Farage's wins in the latest local elections, it's tracking, and the direction of travel is showing that they're probably going to win quite well over the next few years.
I mean, talking about those U-turns, what do you make, Matt, of Starmer now saying he regrets the island of strangers speech? Because that, to me, seemed his big set piece to try and sort of drag people into believing that he is going to be tough on borders. Let's remind ourselves, actually, of what he said.
In a diverse nation like ours, and I celebrate that, these rules become even more important. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers.
I mean, there was a whole hoo-ha over this, confected hoo-ha, I think, from my point of view, saying that it reflected the language of Enoch Powell's infamous rivers of blood speech. And he turned around and said, well, I wouldn't have used those words if I had known that. I had no idea. My speechwriters didn't know either. I mean, first of all, he's given up the fact that he can't actually think for himself or communicate. He's just got to read things from an auto cue. It makes me wonder whether these speechwriters entered in a little request to ChatGPT saying, please write us a hard-hitting speech on immigration, and it sort of looked at original source material and went, oh, hello, Enoch, that would be a good sort of reference to throw in.
This is politically insane to say this, and not because of any sort of views. This was supposed to be a bit of a set piece on Labour getting tough on immigration and whatnot. This is maybe something you would write in a book or as part of a TV series when you're promoting a book a decade after Power and you're going, you know, to this day, that still wasn't really me. I don't know if I made the right decision there. Or we saw it with David Cameron, people that rehabilitate their images post-government and try and talk about the things they should or shouldn't have done. That I could have understood. People, you know, say things. To talk about it now when you're not even 12 months in is bizarre. The slight thing I will give him is, you know, it's no surprise he doesn't write his own speeches. I worked for 7 MPs in my time in Parliament, only one did. And even that used to infuriate me because I wanted to have my say on what they were saying as well. So, no, I want to engage in this. So it doesn't surprise me. I always think you've got to practice your speeches, though. That was my big thing working with MPs. You've got to practice.
As a person who used to be Nigel Farage's right-hand woman, that that man has never written a speech in his life. Everything's off the cuff. The most you ever get is he'll have scribbled down in the back of the car some bullet points he wants to say, and he can actually communicate, and he answers questions. I mean, who'd have thunk it? A politician in the modern era who knows how to use the English language.
Yeah.
But I mean, what do you make of this ridiculous thing as well? You know, of sort of people, all the hoo-ha around this island of strangers form of words. I mean, it was so confected. There would only be like short fringe, far left nutters who would feel triggered by that. He didn't even have to go there.
I think it was clumsy. I think it was clumsy and stupid. And as you say, now he's already backtracking. Why is he U-turning on this? He could have said, look, I understand why people have taken offence to this now, but this is what I meant to say, rather than sort of be grovelling and saying, oh, I'm so sorry, this was a mistake, I would never do it, I take back those words, blah, blah. Say what he was trying to say instead. As you said, this should have been a sort of defining speech for him on immigration. It was around the local elections. He was clearly trying to appeal to a broader audience, I would say perhaps reform voters out there, because immigration, illegal immigration, or migration is the #1 issue for the British public. That's what they want to hear about. And actually there was YouGov polling after the speech which said the vast majority of the British public did agree with the sentiment of the speech.
Yeah.
Yes, there was that one bad line that could have been linked back to Enoch Powell, but again,
Was it a bad line, an island of strangers? I think it's just a perfectly descriptive line. But he's painting himself into a corner here, because now those journalists at The Observer and The Guardian know they can go after him and say, we don't like the words you've used, and he will back down. Did he wobble like a weeble?
I don't know who signed this off in number 10 to go ahead. You've essentially done a sit down with a friend who's going to write up your conversation, and now you look bad. Again, politically insane. I don't understand the logic of it, unless he wants to be seen to the membership, which, you know, it's more the country rather than the membership, to be seen as more within his liberal credentials. I think the term wasn't the worst term. Having it linked with Enoch's not great, but what I would have done, I think he could have used that term in his first speech, coming out of winning an election, and he could have described the way that in many parts of the country there is no sense of community anymore. You have things stolen and ring the police, they don't turn up. We've had 14 years of austerity and people are feeling the pinch. We all seemingly live online now, and we don't, get involved with each other, therefore we risk becoming an island of strangers. And actually you could have tied in immigration with that speech as well, but I think it could have been a much bigger, broader set-piece speech than just immigration. You wouldn't have had this backlash.
Well, what would have helped if he did less speaking and actually did something about the blooming boats? Right, we're going to be taking a break now, but don't go anywhere, because we are going to be having more head-to-head, and also coming up in the 9 o'clock hour, it is today Armed Forces Day, and so we're going to be talking a lot about that in the last hour of the programme. And also we're going to be discussing, after this next break, the fact that the BBC are going to be broadcasting that pretty vile band Kneecap at Glastonbury, despite calls for a ban. That's after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Have we got the sting yet there, Titus? No? Yeah? No? Is it time for this? Can we play it? Is it going to work? No, we haven't got it. Tech up, play me a noise instead. Honestly, what's going on today? I know we've all been awake for 2.5 hours. I'm the only professional. Basically, that's it. I'm by myself at this point. Well, I don't know what they're doing behind that. Exactly. That reflects my feelings exactly. Bad tech op. Right, now, head-to-head is where we're at, and I'm still joined by Matt and Lettice. Let's talk about Glastonbury. I've never been. It looks like the seventh circle of hell. I can't think of anything worse. All these sort of worthy individuals at Worthy Farm going on about, oh, these poor people living in tents. I'm like you're doing and paying like 400 quid for the privilege. The most defended realm on earth, it seems right now. Harder to get into Glastonbury Festival than it is to get a boat over the channel and break into the country. But it always throws up all of this sort of hyper-leftism on steroids, doesn't it? And of course, you've got the Palestine Museum, which is like, what's that? You know, remembering all the times that terrorists have attacked music festivals over the years? Probably not. Magic Grandpa there on stage talking about loving Hamas and all the rest of it, as per usual. But something that sort of deviated a little bit from the norm, which is Rod Stewart, who's going to be playing Glastonbury. Glastonbury? Glastonbury? Don't know what that was. Going to be playing there on Sunday. Could well find himself being booed because in The Sun today, he is saying that voters should give Nigel Farage a chance. Good luck to you, Rod.
He's I suppose, articulating a feeling that people are fed up. And you'd be surprised. I've got several friends at Glastonbury, all vote in different ways, not all on the left. I always hear it's this big lefty loving. I think there's an element of that. That's festivals since, you know, day dot. You look back to Woodstock and all sorts of other things. It's free-loving people letting their hair down. I've done 2 festivals in my life. I'm not a big fan of camping. I like my own comfort, so I'm not built for it. I'd rather leave it. But no, he's articulating the fact that people are feeling worse off than they ever have. We feel much like a carry-on of the back end of the Tory government, that nothing works in the country, everything is broken, and that people want, I suppose, real change. Labour offered change at the last election. That hasn't been forthcoming, or it's certainly not the change people expected.
So you don't reckon he's now going to get booed at Glasgow? I reckon
he probably will. Realistically, I think he'll get booed.
As soon as he strikes up Maggie May, they'll all go nuts. Don't worry about that.
I think he'll definitely get booed because it'll already be a sort of drunk, excited crowd. It doesn't have to be everyone booing at the same time, but there will be sections of that crowd that will boo just because of general sentiment, which I think incorrectly, you know, people realistically, like what we were discussing earlier in the show, they now have a real chance at government. At the local elections, they are now controlling real councils in this country. And as such, I do think there needs to be a little bit of a conversation around the respect you give to each political party as now a real political party within the UK with its own constituents, with its own representatives, with its own people that they are, you know, supporting and creating change for. However, he will definitely get booed.
I reckon he will. And do you know what? This goes one of 2 ways normally. It either sort of concretises someone's feeling and it'll be the thing that makes Rod Stewart go, I'm going to give £1 million donation to Reform, or he's going to do a sort of a Starmer reverse ferret on all of this.
Can I just say, I think you both overestimate people probably getting back to their tents now. Reading the newspaper between now and Rod Stewart going on.
No, WhatsApp groups,
people are not paying
media.
attention at Glastonbury.
I'm telling you, we should put a little bet on this. I reckon he's going to get a frosty
He just needs to say his name, I'm going to say, and it'll create some ripple effects around the crowd.
We'll see.
I reckon he'll get a bit of a boo.
He's a controversial figure, which is fair enough to say.
I think I know why he likes Nigel Farage. I think I've sussed this out. Because a while ago I found out that he'd got fed up with playing with train sets. Did you know he loves a good train set?
I didn't know either of those.
Yeah, he's like made a whole world of like train sets in his life, which is quite something. But he then got into filling in potholes. Did you ever read that story that Rod Stewart's a one-man pothole filling?
So he's done a few
band.
random things.
Yeah, he was like, fed up of potholes, I'm going to go and do it myself. And then, of course, anyone who went to the Reform rally in Birmingham, this biggest rally since the Second World War apparently, would have seen Nigel Farage enter the arena on a JCB Potholer 2000 or something, this machine which is designed to... And I reckon Rod Stewart saw that and went,
That's my guy.
That's him. That's where my vote is going. Now, let's talk about Kneecap, a band I'd never heard of. I've now heard of them because they sound pretty abominable. They have, you know, displayed the Hezbollah flag and all the rest of it. In theory, people are saying they should be banned. They've had concerts where their members have shouted, "Kill your local MP," "Up Hamas," "Up Hezbollah." That's enough if you'd put that on Twitter to give you a 31-month sentence. And yet the BBC are quite happily going to broadcast this band playing at Glastonbury, despite inciting actual murder.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think both the BBC and Glastonbury are in the wrong in this situation. I think the comments, aside from the Hezbollah stuff and the other thing, the comments about calling for deaths of MPs, we've experienced in this country a rise of death threats against our MPs. I mean, poor David Amess was actually murdered by one of his constituents.
Mike Freer had his constituency office burned down by
he's now
Islamists.
stepping down because he won't run the next election because it's all got too much for him. I mean, Tobias Ellwood had his home terrorised by pro-Palestinians as well.
Yeah.
These things are real and significant threats to people who, quite frankly, in my opinion, don't have enough security around them at all times. And to be saying that when you do have hundreds of thousands of followers and supporters, you never know who you're saying that to. So even if you now go back and say, I was just, what didn't mean it, I wasn't serious about it, it's the damage is done. Someone's heard that and been like, they want this to happen.
This is the point. Nobody knew who Lucy Connolly was until the government decided she was going to be made an example of, and then everyone knew who Lucy Connolly was. And the reach of her tweet might have been 100,000 or something. I don't know how many impressions it got.
60,000.
16.
60,000.
So 60,000, right, is the reach of that tweet, which she then later deleted and no one knows who she was. This band performing at Glastonbury will reach millions, not just the people who bought tickets to be there. It's probably one of the most televised, one of the most famous festivals in the world. Loads of people will be listening to it on the radio, watching it on TV, and these people are apparently a known band and could well use this opportunity to incite violence against politicians.
They could. They probably wouldn't. I'm aware that there's a court case ongoing, so I will be careful about what I say. I believe a lot of the stuff they say is unsavoury, right? I was aware of Kneecap. I've never actually listened to any of their music, but I'd seen some of the interviews they'd given on causes to do with the United Ireland and Palestine and all sorts of other things they believe in. I don't know, it depends how much of a freedom of speech idealist you are. I don't think you can sort of forgive things like, threatening MPs with, kill your local Tory and stuff like that. I think with regards to the stuff that they've been charged with and whether that should cause them to be, essentially, I suppose, cancelled, is I believe in innocence until proven guilty. If you can prove in a court of law that they have picked up this flag that's been thrown on stage and truly chanted for a terrorist cause, then fair enough. I think it's going to be very hard to prove that.
I mean, that sort of goes into what a lot of people would say about Lucy Connolly, though, which is she was sort of told to plead guilty. She never had her day in court, and perhaps if she had, it had been very hard to prove the connection between someone writing, however vile it may have been, then saying, for all I care, deleting the tweet later, and that actually having a causal relationship to the actions of people on a street. If that is a hate crime that gives her 31 months in prison, surely these people by now should have been handcuffed. They've all said, oh, it was a joke, it was satirical, it was an effing joke. I mean,
I think with Lucy Connolly, I've always been consistent on all prisoners. If you pose no threat to society and you are applicable for ROTL, which is release on temporary licence, where you can go home of a weekend or go to work and then go back to your cell on a Sunday, that's good. And she's been allowed to have ROTL since November, and for whatever reason they haven't given it to her. The thing that I find quite revealing about debates like this is it's the same people, such as Richard Tice, that went to go and visit her, who normally want to hang and flog prisoners. First time I've ever heard him speak about prisoners' human rights.
I mean, because it's
somebody that subscribes to her sort of political views. He's bothered. He's never. If I'd have gone to prison when I got sentenced all them years ago, he wouldn't have been bothered about me. He'd have gone, well, no, it serves you right, you've done the crime. F around and find out. I believe in taking responsibility for your actions. Should she still be there, Probably not.
We are going to talk about Richard Tice's visits to Lucy Connolly in prison after the break. But, you know, just to sort of get clear, do you think that this band should be performing on stage in Glastonbury? They've also got a speaker from Palestine Action, which is about to be prescribed as a terrorist organisation. Do you think that at this point, Michael Eavis should actually be taking some responsibility rather than doing the whole, oh, you know, everyone can say everything here, we're a festival of freedom, when this is terrorism we're talking about?
Is it?
Well, if Palestine Action are about to be prescribed, then yeah.
Yeah, they are, but even that, I struggle with. We don't even prescribe the IRGC,
That's
who are a
madness,
terrorist.
that, yeah.
But this is what I mean, so I worry about... I think the true story, by the way, and this is not avoiding the question, is we've all been talking about Palestine Action, whatever, I get it sells newspapers. Why have no heads rolled at Bryce Norton?
Right.
That's a security issue.
That is crazy.
We've heard of no internal disciplinary action.
Yeah.
And that means anyone, Iranians or anyone with any nefarious aims, could just wander up and do what they want to play. So that's the issue for me. I think the rest of it is purely a bit of a distraction, actually.
Yeah, good point well made. Right, we're going to go to an advert break now, but don't go anywhere because we are going to be discussing Richard Tice's visits to Lucy Connolly in prison after this. They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel. Broken promises,
Billions blown,
botched U-turns.
and Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power,
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there, welcome back. Now, as we were alluding to before the break, Richard Tice has gone to visit Lucy Connolly. Concerned about rumours that she had been treated badly there, he has used essentially political privilege to be able to go and visit her at HMP Peterborough because she has been denied sort of normal visitation rights to her kids, despite one assumes not being any sort of high-risk prisoner. He's written a piece today in The Sun, astonishing actually, what is being alleged here, where he says that, you know, he's been to see her. She was told she had to be moved to the naughty girls wing. the high security wing where there's the drug dealers, the murderers, the tough nuts, the women who probably are pretty scary to be around. She didn't understand why. She's supposed to have been a model prisoner, very popular. You can imagine it. She was a childminder. I can't exactly, you know, envisage her having fisticuffs with the screws. But then they turned up with a nurse, and she thought to myself, well, they bring a nurse when they're going to use force. Forced her to the ground, cuffed her behind her back, dragged her up 3 stories into this highly dangerous wing, and then denied her any food. And Richard Tice has been to see her and has said, I cannot fathom what is going on here unless, and this is what he has said, unless there is a risk that they want to try and plant some drugs on her and then say, well, now she's got to stay in longer, unless they want to provoke a reaction and then say, well, she's not allowed, you know, early release at 40% because of X, Y and Z. And he's actually surmised that it is so obscene, this treatment that she's received in prison based upon her character, based upon her previous reputation, that he's actually weighing up the possibility that there could have been orders on high to make sure she doesn't get out soon. What do you make of that, Lettice?
I mean, whatever crime you've committed, this feels like disproportionate force used against a woman who then had bruises on her wrists, as he says in the article. So no matter what you've committed, you should be treated with respect in the prisons in these countries. You know, that level of force against her seems disproportionate, and as we've discussed already, the sentence against her also does seem disproportionate. There were other people who were actually involved in those riots. I've got one, Philip Prescott was involved in the actual Southport riots, and he got a lesser sentence than she did for writing that tweet. And I'm not condoning what she wrote in that tweet. It was wrong, and writing anything of such, you know, vile things on Twitter, I don't approve of in any way. But what we're seeing now does seem to be a disproportionately harsh sentence specifically for her.
I mean, what we understand is she hasn't been given, you know, access to leave because she is too high profile. I've actually heard reports that that is the reason why. But of course, it was, frankly, I would say, under the, under the instruction of Lord Hermer, who wanted to do all these televised trials, who wanted to make examples of people, who wanted, for want of a better phrase, to create these political prisoners as deterrents. Lucy Connolly is now probably a household name as a result. Do you think there is a possibility here that they're just thinking, if we let her out, she's going to become a martyr, she's going to become the pin-up, she's going to say things about what happened to her, her trial, so on and so forth, that are going to be deeply problematic for the government, and they would actually go this far?
No.
I think she's becoming more of a martyr now, sorry.
No, not at all. I think that's conspiracy and very far-fetched. I think the government's got far more important things to worry about than Lucy Connolly. Lucy Connolly will get out and do her own thing. She'll totally write a book, be given a load of pieces in newspapers. It's going to happen, right? It doesn't matter what the government does. As I said before the break, she should be allowed out on Rottle. And I wasn't aware of what Lord Hermer had said. I suppose if the media were following her around when she wanted to go about normal stuff, and that's potentially going to actually prejudice her sentence, and she may not get further temporary licence where she can come out, or it may extend her sentence. I don't know how that will work. That is tricky, I suppose, but she should be entitled to it. But this is what happens in prison. I feel for her. I have friends in prison. This is what happens. The prisons in this country are out of control, as we've seen in recent high-profile cases. What you have is certain things like collective punishment, which is totally unacceptable. So when she hasn't had any food, that doesn't surprise me. I have a friend in a Category A prison who, one of the drug dealers in there, because drugs are now so easily accessible, it's just ridiculous, will tell one of the local lads who's on Spice, go and jump on the netting that covers the ground floor just because we want a laugh, and I'll sort you some Spice for later. Fella jumps on it, and then the guards go, right, everyone back in your cells. So the argument is, well, we haven't done anything. He should go back in his cell. Yeah, no, but you should have had a word with him. And what the guards are doing is passing on the responsibility to the prisoners. That if you put up any argument, you're then, you know, potentially harmed physically and whatever else, but you're locked away for 24 hours. And the broader point for me, Lucy Connolly onwards, is these people aren't rehabilitated when they come out. If you spend they've not changed since COVID. During COVID, they kept prisoners in for 23 hours a day. If you come out of that prison after spending 23 hours a day, very little access to food potentially, you're not getting your leisure time as such to let out any frustration or just do stuff. Even the cleaning jobs that some of them have aren't able to do. you're going to come out and go and reoffend straight away again. That's why it costs us 20 billion quid a year. My concern is Lucy Connolly, excuse me, terrible faux pas. Lucy Connolly clearly has a support network around her in her husband and other people that are willing to support her. If she didn't, my fear would be she may go on to reoffend again because she'd be in such a bad way. And that is the concern, I think, for lots of prisoners, and why I think prisoners are in very much need of reform.
I mean, one thing that Richard Tice has done seems to be something that a lot of politicians are doing at the moment, which is taking matters into their own hands. And we're all very used to Robert Jenrick and his vigilante efforts on the tube to catch fare dodgers. I don't know if you've seen this, but let's have a little look at what Chris Philp has been up to. Well, we were going to see Chris Philp, but apparently none of the buttons are working today. There was a pregnant pause there, wasn't there? While Titus... Oh, he's found it! Go on, Titus.
How come you're living here in tents? Go! Take it easy. Take it easy. Whereabouts are you from originally? Romania. Romania. And you travel, and Bulgaria. And you travel like back and forward or stay here?
Go this Blake. Go Blake. Excuse me. Go. Blake.
It's not racist to ask questions.
No.
You would prefer it if people didn't know what you're up to?
No respect to racists.
Well, they seem like a very pleasant bunch. I'm glad they're camping in London's capital city and making friends in the neighbourhood. But what do you make of this? I mean, we've seen Robert Jenrick go after the fare dodgers. Now you've got Chris Philp. Of course, he was the former immigration minister, going and taking these videos. At least they're showing what's going on in this country.
To be honest, yeah, I quite enjoy them in some ways. I also watched a video of him go after one of the Sun investigations, go to one of the migrant hotels and speak to people there about whether they've been illegally working for food delivery services. But, I mean, really what that shows to me is they're slightly undermining the police in this country and showing what the police aren't necessarily doing, because they're going directly to these camps that are being made in London, which are quite frightening and scary and potentially threatening from the experience they just had there, and showing that they're still just happy to be left there and sat there in amongst the public, completely untouched.
But the thing with that is, what do the police do?
Well, nothing.
What are they doing wrong? What you could do is, they're essentially homeless, right? You know, they're living in tents, whatever. All you do is move that issue into the next town.
Haven't the Labour Party actually changed the rule on this and the legality of homelessness, which is sort of something that's happened sort of under the radar, which by and large sounds like a kindly thing to do, which is once upon a time apparently sleeping rough was illegal, and they've actually now said, oh, that's not right, that is old-fashioned and punitive, we're going to get rid of that. Does that not risk actually, because, you know, as brutish as that gang looked there, they seem to often know the loopholes, they seem to often know how to game the system. Do you think we could start getting tent cities in the UK, like we have seen in Ireland, like we have seen in America?
We've had tent cities forever. It's just because you decriminalise it doesn't stop it. We had tent cities in Manchester 2 months ago, camping outside the town hall as a bit of a protest of we've got nowhere to go. And these, you know, these are British people. But if the police
no longer have the right to move them on, surely they are going to get worse and get bigger.
They do have the right. There is something called a public space protection order, which you can apply for through the local authority, and that lasts for 30 days. So that can happen. Again, imprisoning people for being homeless does not solve the homelessness issue. It hides it, it moves it away. If you move it onto the next town,
are they homeless, these lot, or are they just roamers who that's the lifestyle?
Oh, I'm on about homelessness. I'm on about the Vagrancy Act, which you asked about. Yeah. And that, for me,
those gangs will know how to bend the rules. That's my worry. Listen, guys, we actually went out of time. I've got the little tech-up clock going in my ear here. But Lettice, thank you ever so much. Matthew, thank you ever so much. There wasn't so much of a head-to-head. It's sort of like everyone just getting along and agreeing on stuff.
Good discussion.
A good, lovely, wholesome discussion for 1 minute to 9 in the morning. Right, don't go